and Essential Quality is trying to get them. Here's Hot Rod Charlie, a huge long shot at 94-1, coming into the final 16th, but Essential Quality runs by. Jackie's Warriors giving way. Essential Quality's gonna do it. Essential Quality has won the Breeders' Cup Juvenile.
Welcome back to Racing Rundown. Today we're going to be getting into a new series that we're going to be doing over the course of the next 5 months, heading into the Kentucky Derby. As you can probably tell by the title, we're going to be talking about the top 5 horses in both myself and Eric's opinions going into the Kentucky Derby, and this is for the end of 2020. So we're taking all the 2-year-olds, all their races, and analyzing them and giving our, right now, at the end of 2020, who our top 5 are for the Kentucky Derby. Obviously, this is subject to change as more prep races happen in the year 2021 and everything, but right now, at the moment, this is our top 5, so we're going to go into this, and this will be something that we will do mostly every week once we start getting into the very rigorous weekends of prep races where we have a lot of stuff to talk about. So this will be something that will be going on for the next 5 months. So to start off with, we'll pick it up with going from number 5 to 1. The number 5 horse that we have on this list, and Eric and I did mutually agree on this list, so this is the same list for Eric as it is for me. So the number 5 horse is Hot Rod Charlie. The long shot runner-up in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile was definitely a bit of an overlay in the Breeders' Cup, but it's easy to see why, given the fact that he had been 3 times beaten before he did break his maiden in his start prior to the Breeders' Cup. But if you go and look at those races, he was beaten by a couple of really good horses in their own right in some of those maiden races. Looking at the August 14th maiden, which was race 3 on that Del Mar card, he was beaten by Get Her Number, who came back to win the American Pharoah at Santa Anita. So obviously we know that there's a lot of quality in that. And then also the maiden race where he won the start before the Breeders' Cup, which was race 3 on October 2nd at Santa Anita. He beat Parnelli, who was a horse who came back to run a very, very impressive maiden win at Del Mar when he broke his maiden. And then Parnelli did run 3rd in this past weekend sham, but we're not really taking into account the sham in terms of Parnelli. But 2 good efforts in maiden races for Hot Rod Charlie, and then obviously had the really good 2nd place finish behind Essential Quality, who we will be talking about a little bit later on. And Hot Rod Charlie did beat other really talented 2-year-olds in their own rights in that race. So definitely a horse that I think that we should be looking at going forward, and both of us think that we should be looking at going forward. And we obviously don't think that that's a race that was just a one-off fluke. We do think that he will get his opportunity and will get at least make some noise on the Kentucky Derby trail. And right now, it's good enough to put him at number 5 on this list.
Yeah, and at number 4, we have the only horse on this list that doesn't have graded stakes experience, and that's Prime Factor for Todd Fletcher. Broke his maiden in December. Certainly a newcomer, but I imagine through January and February he's going to get a lot of hype because of how impressive he was when he broke his maiden. It was at Gulfstream going 6 furlongs, but he won by almost 9 lengths, and he beat a pretty solid group of 2-year-olds in behind him. Ira Ortiz really didn't have to go to him, and we know what Todd Fletcher does. He gets his horses ready to roll, his young 2-year-olds, early 3-year-olds, and then for the next 6 months, they do a lot of impressive things, and this looks like yet another one of those. It's a one for Windstar Farm, and you always know that they're going to have, tons and tons of Derby prospects. And this is actually, of this list, the most expensive horse at sale was a $900,000 yearling. So tons of potential based off of that maiden win. There was a lot of hype going in based off his price and his works, and he's very unproven. There's a lot of raw talent to him, but I don't think there's a person out there that looks at this horse and says it's not a top Derby contender as things stand. Obviously, he has a lot of work to do, very unproven, but as time goes on, I imagine we're going to see him develop into a very quality Derby contender. And honestly, I think the only reason he couldn't be higher on this list is because he has no graded stakes experience to this point.
And now moving on to number 3, we're getting to Keep Me in Mind, a horse who in his most recent start won the Kentucky Jockey Club, but 3 prior starts, all really good 2nd and 3rd place finishes. 2 of them in Grade 1 races, one of them obviously being the Breeders' Cup Juvenile that we've talked about very significantly. But going to his first start at Churchill Downs on the 2nd of September, that was race 6 on that particular card. He was beaten by Arabian Prince, who came back and ran a couple good placing efforts in stakes at Churchill. He was fourth in the Street Sense and Overnight stake on the 25th, the race that was won by King Fury, who did run in the Breeders' Cup this year. And then he was third in the Kentucky Jockey Club. Arabian Prince was in the race that Keep Me in Mind won last out. So good volume of work for Arabian Prince, which definitely does enhance the reputation of a horse like Keep Me in Mind. And Keep Me in Mind is kind of the same case as Hot Rod Charlie. He was overlooked going into the Breeders' Cup, and this one is a little bit easier to see why it was an overlay, given the fact that he did run good in that maiden race, and then he was beaten 3 1/4 lengths by Essential Quality, but it was a good second place finish for him, and he came back and validated that second place effort that he had in the Breeders' Futurity with a good third place finish in the Breeders' Cup. And then that effort that he had in the Kentucky Jockey Club was also another really good effort. He beat stakes horses in there. King Fury, like I already mentioned, Sitting on Go won the Iroquois, and there were several other horses in there who had some nice races under them. So Keep Me in Mind's definitely one that we have to be on the lookout going forward. The Breeders' Cup was definitely not a fluke, given that he has since come back to win, and you look at his races before the Breeders' Cup, it's understandable why he was 30-1 going in, but definitely one of those horses that you look back in hindsight and say that was definitely a huge overlay. So definitely looking out for him in terms of Midwest. We'll probably see him somewhere in the future, and once we see him, I would definitely venture to say that he would probably be one of the leaders in whichever racetrack he ends up in. He will be one of the leaders in those races that he ends up running in. Now I will turn it over to Eric for number 2 on the list.
Yeah, the top 2, pretty cut and dry. I don't think no one's going to be surprised by it. Number 2 for us is Life is Good. And, while we look at this kind of as an end of 2020 thing, we can't deny that the Sham Stakes was recently, and Life is Good won it. But really his maiden win is kind of obviously what caught the attention of everybody else. Probably one of the best maiden wins we've seen in a while from any horse, because he went wire to wire. Mike Smith truly did not move a muscle, and he beat some pretty good horses in behind him. The second and fourth place finishers from that race are both very, very impressive winners now. The horse that was third in that maiden race has tons of potential as well. So he beat a really good field in there, comes back and wins the Sham. Super nice, not super nicely, but also visually going forward for the Derby. There's more questions now, but at the same time, it is Bob Baffert. We saw what he did with it, Offspring of Into Mischief this past year, inauthentic. Fact of the matter is, horse is undefeated, and there's still some pedigree that suggests a 1 1/8 and a 1 1/4 isn't too far out of the reach. So Life is Good. He's a really good horse. There's obviously questions. He's not a clear number. He couldn't be a clear number 1 based off that past performance, but who knows with what Bob Baffert can do with his 3-year-olds. He has every chance in the world to move himself up on this list by 1 spot should he continue to win.
And the number 1 horse, pretty easy to figure out who the number 1 horse would be. We're talking about Essential Quality, the winner of the Breeders' Cup Juvenile this year. Easily the presumptive champion 2-year-old, but aside from the Breeders' Cup, he does have 2 other really good races. He broke his maiden on Kentucky Derby Day, race 4 on that Churchill Downs card, and he won that race by 4 lengths. And then also was the winner of the Breeders' Futurity. We talked about that with Keep Me in Mind. Keep Me in Mind since came back to win, and there were several other horses in there that were notable. King Fury also one that was in that race. So a couple horses came back to run well in stakes from that, and then given the fact that he did win the Breeders' Cup very impressively, he did close in that Breeders' Cup, and that's something that a lot of people have talked about since the Breeders' Cup. That was a track that people were saying was favoring speed. Essential Quality did close on a track that in the eyes of a lot of people was favoring speed, so definitely another really good point in Essential Quality's corner. Fact of the matter is that he is the top 2-year-old right now in terms of the Kentucky Derby. He has all indications that he's going to be a really, really good racehorse, and I have no doubts that Brad Cox is going to be able to make him progress even more as a 3-year-old. We've never really seen Brad Cox have a horse stay healthy enough to make the Kentucky Derby, but this is probably going to be his horse that gets the Kentucky Derby. We've seen him do it with fillies before, and we know how good he is with his fillies, but I think he finally has his horse that is going to be a real force on the Kentucky Derby trail, assuming everything goes well and he's able to stay healthy. But with all that being said, that's it for this top 5. We will see you next time on Racing Rundown when we talk about the top 5 for the Kentucky Oaks.